Number 10, progress in scientific research. Progress in scientific research will not be possible if frequent changes are observed in the rules, characters, or the fundamental properties of the material or systems of the universe. Now, in the Quran, Surah 30 verses 30, you're going to find a passage that says this. So direct your face toward the religion, inclining to truth. Adhere to the fitrah of Allah upon which He has created all people. No change should there be in the creation of Allah. This is the correct religion, but most of the people do not know. So according to this passage, Muslims believe that Allah's will of making the fundamental behaviors of all creations of the universe unchangeable is actually an opening for scientific research, as well as it's necessary for progress in scientific research. For number 9, let's take a look at proven reason. Scientific research is a combination of experimental work as well as intellectual work. And over in the Quran, Surah 17 verses 36, it says, "And do not pursue that of which you have no knowledge. Indeed, the hearing, the sight, and the heart, about all those one will be questioned." So one of the main sources of errors in justification of research is due to the replacement of knowledge by conjecture. And then in the Quran, Surah 53 verses 28, it says this, "And they have thereof no knowledge, they follow not except assumption, and indeed assumption avails not against the truth at all." So according to the Quran, Muslims believe that no research is accepted without any proven reason. For number 8, let's look at the weight of the clouds. This was a pretty cool one. The Quran states that clouds are not light at all, but contrary to a popular belief once upon a time, clouds are actually very heavy. The Quran says, "And it is He who sends the winds as good tidings before His mercy until when they have carried heavy rain clouds. We drive them to a dead land and we send down rain therein and bring forth thereby some of all the fruits. Thus will we bring forth the dead. Perhaps you may be reminded." That's taken from Surah 7 verses 57. So according to recent research, the weight of clouds have been actually calculated. For example, a cumulonimbus cloud, this is known as a thunder cloud. This type of cloud can contain up to 300,000 tons of water. Next up, for number 7, we're going to be looking at the reduction of the Earth's surface. In the Quran, Surah 13 verses 41, it says the following, "Have they not seen that we set upon the land, reducing it from its borders? And Allah decides there is no adjuster of His decisions, and He is swift in account." Also, if you take a look at Surah 21 verses 44, it says this, "Then do they not see that we set upon the land, reducing it from its borders? So it is they who will overcome." So Muslims look at these two verses and believe that they mention that the surface of the earth has been reduced and diminished from its outlying borders. And this is also confirmed by science. They've indicated and approved that there is a constant loss of matter around the earth, although it's very little though. Also, scientists of the Goddard Space Science Institute of Manhattan discovered that the level of water had been increasing as a result of the melting of ice sheets at the poles of the earth. Extraterrestrial life is at number 6. This is something that I've always wondered about as a kid. What lives out there in outer space? It can't be us, like just us humans in this entire universe. So back in the year 1960, Frank Drake performed the first modern SETI experiment, and that is the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Now when we look over in the Quran, Surah 42 verses 29, this is what it has to say. "And of His signs is the creation of the heavens and earth, and what He has dispersed throughout them of creatures. And He for gathering them when He wills is competent." So the verse goes on to say that mankind will one day come in contact with those creatures in some way. And there's other verses in the Quran that say that they receive revelations as we do. So it's pretty interesting when you relate that to the world of science. Like, when are we going to find those other creatures that live out there? But let's just get back into it now, continuing with number 5, embryology. In the Quran, in Surah 23 verses 12 to 14, this is what it has to say. "And certainly did we create man from an extract of clay. Then we placed him as a sperm drop in a firm lodging. Then we made the sperm drop into a clinging clot, and we made the clot into a lump of flesh, and we made from the lump bones, and we covered the bones with flesh. Then we developed him into another creation. So blessed is Allah, the best of creators. We have to look at the universe expansion. This is a scientific theory that is proven to be true. And in the Quran, it mentions that the universe is expanding, and the following is taken from Surah 51 verses 47 in the Quran. And that says, "And the heaven we constructed with strength, and indeed we are its expanders." Now, as a matter of fact, there's an American astronomer named Edwin Hubble, and he discovered that stars and galaxies, they continuously move away from one another, as well as they move away from Earth. So a universe where everything is continuously moving away from one another, that actually means that this universe is continuously expanding. Number 3 is also a pretty fascinating one, so I want you to listen up real close. There's a lot of information to uncover in number 3. So in the Quran, Surah 39 verses 6, it has a passage that says this: "He created you from one soul, then he made from it its mate, and he produced for you from the grazing livestock 8 mates. He creates you in the womb of your mothers, creation after creation within 3 darknesses. That is Allah your Lord, to him belongs dominion. There is no deity except him, so how are you averted?" So the Quran, it points out something called 3 dark stages of the baby in the womb, and it states that a human being is created in the womb with 3 phases of creation. The order of these phases is as follows. Number 1, there's the darkness of the anterior abdominal wall. And then number 2 is the darkness of the uterine wall. And then number 3 talks about the darkness of the amniochorionic membrane. Also on top of that, in this verse, it indicates that humans come into existence with 3 separate stages which differentiate from one another. And in books of embryology, it states that the life of the uterus also has 3 stages. There's a pre-embryonic stage, then the embryonic stage, and then there is the fetal stage. We're coming down near to the end of this episode, but first we gotta look at number 2, and that is tectonic plates. So we know through science that tectonic plates are produced in the process that's literally called the seafloor spreading. And this happens at mid-ocean ridges where magma bursts out of the earth to produce oceanic crust. And this process also produces volcanoes in the ocean floor, which become seamounts. And we'll take a look at the Quran, Surah 50 verse 7. It says, "And the earth we spread it out and cast therein firmly set mountains and made grow therein something of every beautiful kind." And finally, we made it to number 1, the end of this episode. Yeah, and ironically, we're talking about the end of the universe. There's a passage in the Quran in Surah 21 verses 104 that says, "The day when we will fold the heaven like the folding of a written sheet for the records, as we began the first creation. We will repeat it, that is a promise binding upon us. Indeed, we will do it." So with this description in the Quran, Muslims believe that it actually lines up with the picture of the universe collapsing into a black hole. According to physics, angular momentum would cause the fabric of space to enter into it like rolls of parchment. Then a new universe would emerge from there. So the first thing is the speed of light. Muslims believe that angels are created from light, and the angels communicate the affairs of God, which they get from what is known as a preserved tablet in outer space. And the speed at which they travel to and from this tablet, it turns out to actually be the speed of light. In the Quran, Surah 32 verse 5, it says, "Allah rules the cosmic affairs from the heavens to the earth. Then this affair travels to him a distance in 1 day, at a measure of 1,000 years of what you count." Hence, in 1 day, the angels will travel a distance of 1,000 years according to the lunar calendar, because that's what Muslims counted at that time. The belief is that God is saying that the angels travel in 1 day the same distance that the moon travels in 12,000 lunar orbits. 12,000 lunar orbits or Earth days equals the speed of light. Now science shows that. Now the atmosphere protects us is the next thing. So the atmosphere protects Earth from radiation and meteorites. Now this is also portrayed in the Quran 1400 600 years ago. In the Quran, Surah 21 verse 32, it says, "And we made the sky a protective shield, and they turn away from its sign." The next scientific miracle in the Quran is female bees are the worker bees. So worker bees are actually all females. Now the Quran refers to bees that generate honey as females. So listen to this. In the Quran, Surah 16 verses 68 to 69, it says, "And your Lord revealed to the bees, build your hives in mountains, trees, and in what they build. Then eat from every fruit and follow your Lord's enslaved paths. From its bellies exists drink of different color, in it healing for man." So in Arabic, the word eat or kuli is for females, and that's used in the Quran. And the term follow a path is the word usluki in Arabic, and that refers to females as well. As also the term its bellies is butuniha, and that's also used for females. The Quran also mentions hearing before seeing. So this is what I mean. So hearing is one of the first senses to develop. Now this is only known in recent history, and it's also mentioned in the Quran. The Quran, Surah 76 verses 2, it says, "We created man from a fertilizing sperm to test him, and we made him hearing and seeing." Also the Quran, Surah 23:78, it says, "It is he who produced for you the hearing and the eyesight and the feelings, but little gratitude you show." So the Quran always refers to the hearing before the seeing, which turned out to be the actual order of human development in the womb. Flight comes in at number 6. So the Quran is also believed by Muslims to have foretold that humans someday would be able to reach the sky. In Surah 29:22, it says, "You cannot escape Allah's might on earth or in the sky, and you have no protector and no savior besides Allah." Also in Surah 84:19, it says, "You will ride one layer from another layer." The word tabak in Arabic means layer in English, and from this came certain myths about flying carpets, but now the flying aircrafts that go up layer upon layer are what we know today. Also, sound waves. According to the University of Washington, the original sound waves were not temperature variations, but they were actual real sound waves spreading around the universe. Now in the Quran, Surah 41 verse 11 indicates this, and it says, "Then he directed himself to the heaven when it was smoke, and then said to it and to the earth, 'Come willingly or by force.' They said, 'We do come willingly.'" So the heaven replying back implies that the heaven had a voice, which would mean it emitted a sound wave. Another miracle Muslims point to is high altitudes affect your breathing. As altitude increases, atmospheric pressures and oxygen levels in the atmosphere actually decrease, which eventually gets to a point where we can no longer breathe. Now we all know this, the higher you go, the harder it is to breathe. Now in the Quran, Surah 6 verse 125, it says this, "Those whom Allah wants to guide, he opens their chest to Islam, and those whom he wants to leave astray, he makes their chest tight and constricted, as if they are ascending to the sky." Bones forming before muscles is also another miracle. Apparently the first formation of actual bones happens in the jawbone at day 41, and about 3 days later, that's when the associated muscles are formed. And in the Quran, Surah 23 verse 14, it says, "Then we develop the semen into a leech, then we develop the leech into a lump, then we develop the lump into bones, then we clothe the bones with flesh, then we produce it into another creature. Most blessed is Allah, the best of creators." Number 2, now we look at the part of the brain responsible for lying. So for centuries, everybody thought that the frontal part of the human brain was responsible for sight, because of course it's at the front of your head. But we know now that the part responsible for vision is actually at the back of the brain. So if you fall back and hit the back of your head, it could affect your sight or make your eyes go cross-eyed. But now science shows us that the frontal part of our brain, or the prefrontal cortex, is responsible for forming intelligent thoughts like creating lies. And Muslims quote the Quran, Surah 96 verse 16, that says, "A lying, sinful forehead," which indicates that lying is happening in the front of your head. Now, number 1, we have planets, stars, and all of the celestial bodies are actually moving. For centuries, it was believed that the Earth was fixed and the sun and the moon and other planets and the stars and all that revolved around the Earth. But an interesting passage from the Quran that the Muslims point to is Surah 39 verses 5, and it says, "Allah created the heavens and the earth in truth. He overlaps the night over the day and overlaps the day over the night, and enslaves the sun and the moon all move to a pre-recorded destiny. Miracle number 10 is the color of water. Years ago, people thought that water was just transparent. No one thought that the color of water could actually turn black. But scientists have actually discovered a new characteristic of water. At a higher pressure, the water molecules become half liquid and half solid. Now, what's called superionic water forms in higher temperatures and pressures. It's very dark and thicker than, well, water. And the Quran says that in the heat of hellfire, water actually looks really dark, like tar. It's mentioned in the Quran in Surah 18 verse 29. It says, "We have prepared for the unjust a fire whose curtains will hem them in. And when they cry for relief, they will be relieved with water like tar, which scald their faces." Number 9 is the process of photosynthesis. So photosynthesis is a process used by plants and other organisms to convert light energy into energy that they can use. And in the Quran, Surah 18 verse 35, it says, "And cite for them the parable of the present life. It is like water that we send down from the sky. The plants of the earth absorb it, but then it becomes debris scattered by the winds." Now, photosynthesis converts carbon dioxide and water into oxygen and sugar. Most of the water evaporates back into the atmosphere, which the term debris points to in the Quran. Gardens being therapeutic come in at number 8. Reductions in stress, as well as tiredness, depression, anger, anxiety, have all been documented when people actually go into gardens. Engagement with gardens has increasingly been recognized as not only a cost-effective health intervention, but also a treatment or occupational therapy for those with psychological health issues, and this is done with what is called horticultural therapy. Now, this statement comes from the National Center of Biotechnology Information. Gardening is beneficial for health, a meta-analysis published in 2016. And the Quran, Surah 27 verse 60, it says, "Or who created the heavens and the earth, and rains down water from the sky for you? With it produces joyful gardens whose trees you could not produce." Now, the term bahjat means joy or delight in Arabic, and that's the word used. So in this verse, gardens are actually bringing joy or delight, and since today's gardens are being prescribed as a natural antidepressant of sorts, Muslims view this as a miracle. Next up, we have meteorites. So when a meteor enters the atmosphere, the meteor heats up so much that it starts to shine, and then the air burns the meteor, and poof, nothing is left, right? In the Quran, Surah 52 verses 44, it says, "Even if they were to see lumps of the sky falling down, they would say, a mass of clouds." So people would think that they're clouds because of the ashes that are left after the meteor gets and Muslims say, yeah, that's a miracle. Miracle number 6 is female spiders spinning webs. It's generally accepted that adult female spiders spin the webs while adult males do not, outside of looking to mate. This is according to Speely, Do Only Female Spiders Build Webs, published in 2019, this year. And in the Quran, Surah 29 verse 41, it says, "The likeness of those who take to themselves protectors other than Allah is that of the spider. It builds a house, but the most fragile of houses is the spider's house. If they only knew." Now, when it says those who take, the term in Arabic is iktakata, and that's for males. Now, iktakatat is for females, and the Quran uses the female version. At number 5, we look at the mountains having roots as well as floating. So the highest point of the earth is in the Himalayas at Mount Everest, standing at 8.8 kilometers high. Now, this mountain has actually 250 kilometers of deep roots. This was recorded in Life Science Depth of Himalayan Mountain Roots Revealed back in the year 2010. Now, the Quran in 2 places says mountains as pegs, as well as it says, "And mountains he anchored." So pegs are used to hold a tent or something in place, and pegs have a part of it above the ground as well as another part that's into the ground, and the Arabic word means anchored, and this is actually a term that applies to ships floating on water, like when they're anchored to land. So similarly, this is how mountains or other landforms really actually float above a semi-molten asthenosphere. Yeah, Google that term, asthenosphere. Female ants come in at number 4. So check this. All male ants have wings. All worker ants are females, and all ants that don't have wings are females. Now in the Quran, Surah 27 verse 18, it mentions this: until when they came upon the valley of ants, and the ants said, "O ants, enter your homes so that you do not be crushed by Solomon and his soldiers while they do not feel it." Now for the word said, khala is for males and kalat is for females. Now the Quran of course uses kalat for females, so if the ants actually had wings, it would have just flown away. However, they didn't have an option in this context in the Quran, but rather they had to go and hide into their home. So Muslims believe that the ant is correctly addressed as a female in this passage, which they identify as being another miracle. Number 3, the universe is expanding. So scientists today do not know what dark energy actually is, but they do know, however, that it exists and it's causing the entire universe to expand. In the Quran, Surah 51 verse 47, it says, "And the heaven we built with craftsmanship, and we are still expanding." The Quran also said that everything is made of pairs, and today we know that all matter is actually in pairs. So matter and antimatter, electrons and positrons, and so on. And in the Quran, Surah 36 verse 36, it says, "Glory to him who created in pairs all things that the land produces, and their own kind, and other things of that they have no knowledge of." And finally, at number 1, continental drift. So back in the year 2014, the National Geographic published "How do we know the continents are moving?" And this is what they said: 50 years ago, continental drift was a fringe hypothesis rejected by most geologists. Today, the theory of plate tectonics is universally accepted as true and unifies once separate areas of geology under one grand banner. There are mountains of evidence that plate tectonics had taken place in our planet's past. Now, the Muslims point to Quran 27 verses 88, and it says, "You see the mountains and think they are firmly fixed, but they are moving away just like the clouds are moving away."